Everyone. My name is Joni Shubin, and I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished panel and our online guest on behalf of the Jewish Democratic Women's Salon Atlanta. JDWS was founded in 2012 out of outrage, initially over the lack of public understanding and support for the Affordable Care Act. And here we are 8 years later, and we're still outraged, most recently by President Trump's efforts in collaboration with the Republican Party to undermine the protections guaranteed by that very same Affordable Care Act. Outrage has become our second nature to us, as our state is dominated by a party that marches in lockstep with our president in imposing a legislative agenda that deviates from our core Jewish values on the issues that mean the most to us, like gun safety, criminal justice reform, access to health care, reproductive rights, voting rights, and environmental protections, and more. As Jews, this week, we mark the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. This Yom Kippur reminds us that redemption is a communal experience, but we didn't need to be reminded this year because we are reminded daily by COVID that what affects some affects us all. It's up to us to raise each other up, and our guests this evening are going to do that, or just the people to do that. Tonight, we are joined by Representative Jasmine Clark, Georgia House District 108, Senator Sally Harrell, Georgia Senate District 40, Representative Mike Walensky, State House District 79, and Representative Matthew Wilson, State House District 80, each of whom is running as an incumbent with a proven track record of representing the best interests of Georgia citizens. We are eager to hear their hopes and aspirations for our next legislative session and learn how we can help assure that they remain just where we need them, in our state General Assembly. Tonight is the last of our 6-week series, Cocktails and Candidates, and I'd like to give special thank you to our Jewish Democratic Women's Salon election outreach coordinators, Mary Barron and Alice Wertheim, and their committee who put untold hours into organizing all these great programs. I also want to remind everyone that the entire series is now available on our very own personal YouTube page called Jewish Democratic Women's Salon, in case you happen to miss one of the previous programs. Now I'd like to invite Gloria Moore to make welcoming remarks from DeKalb County Dems, and then Gloria will turn the program over to Debbie Schendelman, tonight's moderator. Thank you.
Joni, thank you for that. I am so delighted to be here amongst friends. This is a really great event that JDWS is doing, and I've seen others of your panel discussions, and they've been wonderful. So I encourage everybody to see them. And I would like to bring greetings to all of you who are attending and participating from DeKalb Dems, and especially from John Jackson, who is the chairman of DeKalb Dems, who could not be with us tonight because he's running the general meeting for DeKalb Dems tonight. But I'm happy to be here with my friends Jasmine and Sally, Mike and Matt, who we aggressively and enthusiastically support and are looking forward to hearing from them again this evening. So with those remarks, I will turn the program over to Debbie. Thank you so much for having us this evening and letting us co-sponsor this.
Debbie, you're muted. Debbie, you're muted.
Too many things on the screen. I'm sorry. I'm not going to repeat what I said because we'll thank everybody again at the end, and we've got a lot to get to tonight. But again, I'm Debbie Schendelman. We're going to give each of the candidates an opportunity to speak. We'll go in alphabetical order for this first little introduction. So we will start with Representative Jasmine Clark, House District 108. She represents the Gwinnett area. She couldn't participate in the Gwinnett session last week, but now all of our group will get to hear her, and their group can tune into this video later. But she represents her in her district the cities of Lilburn, Stone Mountain, Mountain Park, the Gwinnett part of Tucker, Lawrenceville, and Norcross. Jasmine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for hosting this evening. I want to say thank you to the Jewish Democratic Women's Salon. And I want to say thank you to the DeKalb Dems for, welcoming me tonight and letting me join y'all's DeKalb family for a night. I have spent a lot of my life in DeKalb County as well. So DeKalb holds a special place in my heart. And so it is my honor and pleasure to be here tonight with you all to talk about the issues. As Debbie said, my name is Dr. Jasmine Clark, and I represent Georgia's House District 108. I am a PhD scientist in microbiology, and I lecture at the Emory School of Medicine. Nursing, not medicine, the Emory School of Nursing. The reason why I decided to run for office was because I felt like in Georgia, we needed to inject some science voices and science perspectives into legislating and policy making in Georgia. In 2017, I led the Atlanta March for Science. And it was there that I saw that 10,000 people converged on Candler Park to march in the name of science. And it really showed me that there are people who care about these things. And so when I saw that my then opponent was running unopposed in 2018, I decided that I would at least give the people in Georgia's House District 108 a choice on who a choice on who they wanted to represent them. And I ran as the science voice. And so since then, I have used that science voice to advocate for things like healthcare, education, common sense gun legislation, voting rights, and so much more. And so again, thank you all for this opportunity tonight, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much. Sally Harrell represents Senate District 40. She's going to speak next, and the district covers DeKalb, Fulton, and Gwinnett counties. In those counties, there are 10 cities, which gives her an awful lot to juggle. Sally, take a couple of minutes and tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I know many of you, I don't know all of you. It's also a pleasure to be here with my colleagues because we have not been able to spend much time together. So I think it'll benefit us as well to compare notes about what we know and what we think is coming up for us after the elections. So if you remember, Senate District 40 was in Republican hands for decades. When I flipped the seat in 2018, defeating a 20-year Republican incumbent. And we did that with almost 10 percentage points. And it was really our strong ground game and all our volunteers, which Ellen Schwartz, I believe, is here. Ellen is the person who organizes all my volunteers. So thank you, Ellen. This is what enabled us to turn this formerly Republican district and put it into Democratic hands. So as Debbie mentioned, Senate District 40 crosses 3 county lines. This makes it a big job for me because when you represent 3 counties, that means you have to keep track of 3 school boards, 3 county commissions, and as she mentioned, that area encompasses 10 cities as well. That's really an example of how the Republicans gerrymandered the district in 2010, because that gave the Republican, and now me, votes in the Gwinnett delegation, the Fulton delegation, the DeKalb delegation, as well as the City of Atlanta delegation. So that gives now me a lot of power. So I look forward to tonight. Like I said, I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and as well. And thank you so much for organizing this forum. I've been looking forward to it today.
Thank you, Sally. Next up is Mike Walensky, House District 79. And it covers all of Dunwoody, part of Doraville North, north of 285, includes the Assembly Yard set area, which must be very interesting to have, and part of Chamblee, which is around the Huntley Hills Elementary School. Mike, take a couple of minutes and tell us about yourself.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to the Jewish Democrat Women's Salon. Thank you to DeKalb Dems. Y'all have been an amazing voice and an amazing partner through my journey. It's been an honor to serve as a voice down at the legislature for the past 2 years. It's been a great success, and I keep working hard with everybody's help. I hope to do it for 2 more years. My district is unique. It's 100% DeKalb County, 100% in my amazing state senator, Sally Harrell's district, who you just heard from. And I'm 100% in Congresswoman Lucy Best district. So that's very rare. I just have 1 state senator, 1 congresswoman, but it makes life very easy because they're both amazing. I was born in Piedmont Hospital and raised in Sandy Springs, went to North Springs High School and graduated from UGA, then went to law school. Over my first term as state rep, I fought the horrible fetal heartbeat bill. I fought against billions of dollars in budget cuts to our education system and those with disability. And my plan for upcoming years is to fight against the extreme partisan politics, fight for common sense, safe gun ownership laws, and really work to bring us together. As work, I'm a catastrophic injury wrongful death attorney, and down at the Capitol with State Rep Matthew Wilson, we're one of 23 attorneys out of 180 state representatives. And having that, just being one of 23 is very important because we get called on by reps from both parties to help them with their legislation. And it really helps us form great relationships with both parties down at the Capitol. One of my top accomplishments this term was passing House Bill 507. I was one of 2 freshman Democrat to pass a bill. It was a great honor. And this bill came about from a constituent who had a bunch of businesses had a big tax issue. So we got that bill across, and it makes sure that that businesses, local businesses, won't be taxed as harshly going future. And there's a lot more to do with that. And many of y'all know that prior to being a state rep, I spent 5 years on the side helping the Anti-Defamation League get their hate crimes bill introduced. And I can't express the emotion, happiness, gratefulness that I had the opportunity to vote yes in favor of the hate crimes legislation and see it pass this year. I'm so glad that our state is no longer one of 5 to not have it, that we actually have a bill that protects all. A bill I'm going to keep working on that I had last year was a cyberbullying bill. It's a very complex issue, how to deal, whether it's criminal or whether in the school system, but I'm going to keep working because there are children out there. You know, it used to be that you were just bullied when you were at school and you'd go home and you'd be with friends or family. And now due to technology, people are bullied 24 hours a day, and we got to really work to catch up with technology. Once again, it's been an honor to serve as state representative, House District 79. I look forward to fighting more. And just the words I keep saying is during these difficult times, especially if you watch that debate, but don't give up on each other. Let's trust each other and trust the process. We will get through this together because we are all more alike than we are unalike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And next will be Matt Wilson, and he covers House District 80, which is Brookhaven, Chamblee, and Sandy Springs.
Debbie, and thank you, Jewish Democratic Women's Salon and DeKalb Dems for co-hosting this and for pulling us all together tonight. This is what a great treat to see some friendly faces, some friends from the campaign trail, for sure. And it's really nice to be with y'all because I just want to point out, in case you didn't realize it, but JDWS and the DeKalb Dems are professional blue wave makers, okay? Because the blue wave that swept all 4 of us into office, along with a bunch of others, happened because of all of the work that y'all put in 2017 and 2018. The center of the blue wave was in the communities where all of us live, right? North Metro Atlanta area. So so it's really special for me to be with y'all, because you're where the good energy and the good force is. So good evening, everyone. I'm Matthew Wilson. I am the state representative for House District 80, which covers almost all of Brookhaven, a part of Sandy Springs, a tiny chunk of Chamblee, 2 voters in the city of Atlanta, the land under I-285 in Dunwoody. So I cover a lot of different delegations, and that is gerrymandering for you. But I'm very proud to represent District 80 and happy to be with y'all. Very quickly, just a little bit about me. I grew up here in Georgia. I grew up in Griffin, actually, so I'm a Georgia boy. Went to UGA like Mike for undergrad and law school. But before I went to law school, I did a national program called Teach for America, and taught middle school for a few years, which fundamentally changed sort of my outlook on what I wanted to do with my life. And so part of that was I knew I wanted to go into public service. Went to law school. I've been practicing law for the last 7 years, personal injury practice here in Brookhaven. I had the privilege of running for this seat in 2018, and we won. You know, together working with Sally, we flipped the district, and I beat a Republican, becoming only the second openly gay man to be elected to the Georgia legislature. Sam Park was the first from Lawrenceville. You know, and along with Jasmine and Mike and Sally and a lot of others, we have been fighting the good fight down there. Some of the things that I have been focused on are redistricting reform, bringing an independent redistricting commission to Georgia, working with Senator Elena Parent on that, some common sense, gun sense legislation, trying to bring a red flag law to Georgia. And that's something I'm gonna be working on a lot more come January. Some tax relief bills for Brookhaven and Chamblee, and also surprisingly, one of the bills that I introduced that actually got the most traction this year or the past 2 years was a bill to ban conversion therapy in Georgia, and I have been working a lot on that in the off season, and feel very optimistic that we're going to be moving that legislation forward come January. So a lot to talk about tonight. I'm very glad to be with all of you.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to take a few minutes with each of the candidates now and maybe go in depth a little bit on some issues in reverse order. So Matt, I'm going to call on you again. And one of the things that occurred to me that I think a lot of us, because of where we are in proximity to the city of Atlanta, is traffic and transit. And I wondered if you could spend a few minutes talking about some of the issues up here on the top end, in particular with all the growth. I know you have an interest in transit. The state rather, is pushing their toll lane project out on 285. And could you speak to that some, and what impact, and I don't even know with the changes in the state's finances with the pandemic, if there's been any rethinking of what's going to go into that. It is such an expensive project.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of my constituents are kind of affected by this. I have constituents at the top end, 285, who are affected by that construction. I have constituents that live on either side of 400 that are affected by that construction project as well. So a lot of construction going on. And I know that Sally and Mike have also been very plugged in on this. But you know, you mentioned rethinking, and unfortunately, that's just not a word that GDOT knows. I have been, one of the things that has been most frustrating for me in this process is, you know, these projects were started 10 plus years ago, is when they were submitted to the federal government for funding. And then GDOT gets the appropriation for this. And then they buy up all the land. And then right before they start doing the construction is the first time there's a community meeting to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. Here, we got these nice big blow up charts to show you what it's going to look like and what houses are going to be affected. And people say, well, I don't know. I don't want this. This is going to affect me, my land. It's going to affect my house. I'm going to have to move. Neighborhoods say, we don't want this. And the answer that they get from GDOT and the state is, it's too late. This plan was approved 10 years ago. We've already got the money for it. We've got to build it now. So, you know, one of the things that I look forward to a Democratic-led state house is being able to use that power to bring some common sense to GDOT policies and to make sure that communities are more involved on the front end of that process. Too few citizens are even aware of what's going on. Too few legislators. I don't even know about these projects that are being submitted to the federal government until after the award has been made. And so, you know, one of the things we were able to do was elect a new 6th congressional district representative to the Georgia DOT board, Kevin Abel. And so we have an advocate in him. I know I've been trying to work through him and work with him on some of those solutions. But you know, it's very tough because unfortunately the construction that we see going on right now, there's very little that we can do to stop the construction. Now, the other thing, and then I'm going to stop talking so some of my colleagues can jump in. But you know, the other thing is, so we got to work on getting more citizen input on the front end, but then looking at the back end of the projects, the final product, making sure that we're strongly advocating for noise reduction barriers and mitigation efforts and things like that. GDOT is way too focused on just bridges and roads. We need to expand our thinking to transit, you know, but it's a long-term process, and we've got to invest in those conversations now.
Thank you, Matt. And I think it's important. I think what we'll find is because we've been forced to go to these kinds of formats, we now know that we can have these discussions among constituents and interested parties. You're right. I went to some of those GDOT sessions. They are terrible and lacking information. So we'll keep that on the table to continue a discussion later. Mike, you're up next. And let's spend a few minutes talking about following up on, you talked about the hate crime legislation and how proud you were, how gratifying it was for you to be able to vote on something that you had worked on for so long. In the wake of Ahmaud Arbery's shooting, it was just a terrible summer for us all. Across the country, in this state of Georgia, in Atlanta, it was just horrendous. It's led to the moniker of defund the police. Talk a little bit about what that really means, and perhaps talk about about criminal justice reform together, because I don't think everybody understands what they're hearing, what the terminology means when they hear it.
Yeah, well, I'm very involved or have a lot of background in this. When I was in law school at the University of Maryland School of Law, the whole third year of law school, I worked for the Baltimore Public Defender Felony Division. And we've heard a lot, the term defund police just being thrown around. And this idea is not just whether you want money to go to police. The Republicans in both parties, they're very good at taking these ideas and turning them into two words. But really what this is about is how can we best use police officers? I think most of our state and most people in our country want everybody to be safe. It doesn't matter if it's citizens, police officers. We know there's always good people and there are some people who are bad actors. So when we hear the term defund police, what that really means is if there's a person who's on the road who may seem dangerous, who's in a better spot to handle that situation, a social worker, a psychologist, or a police officer? So the idea is actually, this is a benefit to police officers. How do we get them more resources? How do we have it in a situation where there are people involved in very scary and very difficult situations that may be better trained? And that would keep everybody safer. It would keep citizens safer from these horrible things that we're seeing. It'll keep police officers safer. And the other thing that I've been working on, we need to see more in Georgia. And I'm lucky because I talk to a lot to the chiefs of police in my cities, and I know how much training they do. But we need to make sure that all police officers are properly trained and get the proper training, but also trained for the exact constituents or people that they see on a daily basis. And that's very important. And in terms of, I forgot the main question, but.
Well, it was talking about
Yeah.
that and how that plays into criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah, and as a whole, one of the biggest concerns I have with, well, not the biggest, I have a lot of concerns with our state budget. But one of the main concerns is the funding of private prisons, both from a moral responsibility and a fiscal responsibility, and the treatment of those people in those facilities. I have a big problem with that, but Governor Deal did a great job of starting the process of how can we not have people spend more time in jail or prison? How can we make sure that people are getting back on their feet and being helped instead of being put in positions where they're being more torn down? So it all comes together of just treating people better, really thinking and planning and trying to understand in a situation, what is the safest and best way to handle that situation? And you know, it's just, especially during an election year, things have become so partisan. You hear these words of people just fighting. But if we all just take a step back, and I think we're hearing a lot of people who are coming together from work and want to work together, especially in Georgia on both sides, I think we're making progress. And I think everybody wants to continue to help with criminal justice reform and really help everybody in our state.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. There are so many weighty issues that we have, and it's a shame that, you know, we don't have more time. They each could take an evening unto themselves, and maybe we'll have some more time to get back to it. Sally, you're up next, and I know, and I've heard you talk about this from the first time. I think I heard you make a presentation when you ran for the last in 2018. But I know how committed you are to public education, starting with early childhood all the way through college. So what are the prospects of restoring some of the funding to public education? Is it going to require a shift of power, the balance of power in the State House? Are there things we can do? Because as you're probably going to say, they keep trying to balance the budget on the back of public education, and it's just not working for us. So we'll let you talk about that.
Thank you, Debbie. It is true that education policy is one of my main motivators to get back into public office, having taken several years off to raise my own children in DeKalb County schools. And then I did homeschool for a while because I had one child who just wasn't learning in the way that DeKalb County schools were teaching. So I tried so many different methods of trying to educate this child. So I can really identify with the struggles that people have with public education. It is one of the most important things we do in the state legislature because over 50% of the Georgia budget does go to public education. The second highest category is healthcare. And we all know that we don't spend what we should in healthcare. So that leaves even more of our spending on public education. And I want to spend a few minutes just kind of educating you all about how we budget for education, because that comes into play in terms of how the Republicans message what they are doing for public education. Our public education funding formula is called the Quality Basic Education Act, and it goes all the way back to 1985 and hasn't been substantially changed since then. And that's one of the reasons why we are in the situation we are in. Like when the pandemic hit and we didn't have the proper technology to be able to move towards a virtual education, is because we haven't revised our funding formula for so long. We've had multiple blue ribbon commissions delving into what needs to be done, and repetitively during the last 15 years, nothing has been done. So there's really two things about the Quality Basic Education Act that I want to educate you about. The first is that the formula, the way the formula works is it takes into consideration what does it take to educate each individual child. Obviously, and what are the expenses? Obviously, it takes a teacher, it takes a building, it takes janitors, it takes books, it takes light bulbs, and it calculates how much money goes into each aspect of that child's education. Well, what did we not have in 1985? We didn't have technology in the computers that we have now. So that has not been taken into consideration. The other thing that QBE takes into consideration is you don't get necessarily the same amount of money for each child, because there, I think it's 26 categories of different children that bring in more or less money. For instance, a special education child is going to bring in more, or an ESL, English as a second language, is going to bring in more dollars. What we don't have in the formula is the impact of poverty, for instance. And this has been on DeKalb County's legislative agenda for a while, that it takes more money to educate a low income child than it does a high income child, but yet that is not accounted for in the QBE formula. In addition to the state funding, which comes from income tax and sales tax, we also have local add-ons. And so your property tax is added on, money from your property tax is added on to the money that, say, DeKalb County has. But one thing the QBE formula does is it equalizes that local add-on throughout the state, because we have some districts that have a relatively small tax base compared to districts like Cobb and DeKalb that have large tax bases. So we actually transfer local funds from one district to the other. Well, this also hasn't been updated. And so like Gwinnett County was a lower tax base county in 1985, and DeKalb was a wealthy tax base. And that has more equalized, but the formula hasn't changed. So that's an issue. So what the Republicans are doing, what they've done for 2 years in a row, not last year, but the 2 years before that, is they have said they have fully funded public education. Well, that's not exactly true. What they've done is they haven't cut it, because for years and years and years, going all the way back to the early 2000s, they implemented what we all got used to hearing as austerity cuts. And so they were cutting money out of the QBE formula before they sent it on to the counties. And we got very used to this because it went on for so long. And now, if you look at the last 10 years, we've cut $10 billion from public education through these austerity cuts. If a formula is based on 1985, if it's based on 1985 formula, if you fully fund that formula, then are you really fully funding education? I would say no, you are not, because you have not updated the formula. The other thing is that there are certain things that get funded outside the formula. And the most important thing in that category is transportation. School buses are not in the formula. And we are only funding about 20% for school transportation of what we should be if education was fully funded. And they aren't even taking that into consideration when they say that education is fully funded. The other thing, and this is more.
Wait, Sally, I hate to cut you off, but we need to give Jasmine a chance too. So if you'll
Okay.
get
Well,
to
let me
that
make
point.
one point and then I'll be done. And that's that, like, attendance in DeKalb County right now is down 5%. That is going to affect how much money comes to DeKalb in the next budget. So I guess in wrapping it up, I would be cautious in hearing the words fully funded education. And we as Democrats need to point out that the Republicans are not fully funding public education.
Thank you, Sally. And so the theme through all of this really is funding, and obviously the state needs to look at how everything is funded. Jasmine, one of the things that I hoped you'd talk about, obviously I noted you referenced that you served as the director of the March for Science, and I didn't know how many people had attended. That's really very impressive that you had 10,000 participants. But from your background in science and being a lecturer in the nursing school, obviously I'm going to assume that healthcare is a big interest of yours. We know that it's a major issue in the state, that we have 240,000 Georgians that lack insurance, and mainly due to the state's refusal to expand Medicaid. Obviously, COVID-19 has shown a real light on the holes in medical services. Well, where do you think we can go to this? What more can we do? How can we, move those who don't understand? And I'm sort of horrified with reading what they intend to do moving forward in covering people with health insurance. Would you spend some time and talk about that for us?
Yes. So when it comes to healthcare, we have to realize that healthcare is under assault, not just in our state, but nationally. Right now, we have a president that has basically taken to court the Affordable Care Act, and basically he wants to dismantle it. That's the simplest way of putting it. And our own state AG is a part of that suit. Like, he joined on to that. And so even he is trying to dismantle ACA. I don't know how many of you know someone or are yourself on ACA, but I was. In 2014, when I first graduated from graduate school, I worked part-time at several different schools in Atlanta, basically putting together a full-time schedule by adjuncting at different colleges. So one of the drawbacks to being an adjunct is that you are not full-time faculty, and therefore you do not have access to benefits. So I was one of those people who relied on the ACA in order to have access to health insurance and to be able to go to the doctor during that year that I was not a full-time employee. Everyone does not have access to employee-based or employer-based insurance. Even people who are walking around looking like they have everything going for themselves, even people with PhDs in microbiology who are standing in front of the classroom and teaching you all the sciences. So, this idea that we're just going to dismantle this healthcare that millions of people rely on right now. And it's not just people like me who had to put together a full-time schedule through adjuncting. It's people like small business owners. It's people like those who are self-employed. These people rely on the Affordable Care Act. So what does that have to do with Georgia? Or what does that have to do with the upcoming election? When we talk about voting, we're not just talking about voting for a person. We are talking about voting for some people's lives and livelihoods as far as access to healthcare, because that is also on the ballot. So now let's bring it down to Georgia. And Georgia has one of the highest uninsured rates in the nation. I think we are top 4 out of all of the states. We are top 4 in most uninsured. So that's bad. We don't want to be there. We don't want to be in the top of that category. that affects everybody. This pandemic has shown that access to healthcare is not about the individual. It is about the community and those around you. If you have people around you in your community, in your schools, at your jobs, at your grocery store, at your kids' soccer game, if you have people around you who are afraid to go to the doctor or who cannot go to the doctor or cannot afford to go to the doctor, then that can have an effect on you when you have a pathogenic contagion ravaging your community. But not just that, one simple thing, expanding access to expanding Medicaid and filling in that coverage gap could give so many more Georgians that access to healthcare that they need so that they are not doing things like evading healthcare, evading preventative care. You know, I hate to tell the story because it really hurts me to talk about it, but I think it's something that people need to understand. There are people right now who are experiencing life-threatening symptoms that will refuse to go to the ER. They will refuse to let you call an ambulance for them because they are more afraid of that hospital bill than they are afraid of the illness or the death that could come from that illness. And that really hurts my heart. And when I say there are people, I know people. I know people, or I knew people who are no longer here today because they did not pay attention to symptoms like chest pain. And that was, they are no longer with us. And that should not be in our state, in our nation. That just should not be. People should not be afraid to get care. And so our governor's refusal to expand Medicaid and instead seeking these waivers that really cover less people, cost the state more money, and just create more barriers and would give people access to some plans that I like to call junk plans, because there's nothing worse than showing up to the doctor, showing your insurance card and being told that thing that you need or that thing that your child needs or someone in your family needs, it's not covered. And so it's still going to cost you an incredibly large amount of money in order to get treatment. That's not okay. Trying to dismantle the ACA would put a lot of people, such as people with pre-existing conditions, in a very tough spot. And so we need to elect people with the political will to feel that it is just as important to invest in human lives as it is important to invest in our highways and other things that we don't mind throwing money at. We can throw money at a freaking project on 285 and 400, but when you ask for a similar amount of money to make sure that people have access to healthcare, everyone talks about fiscal responsibility. It is fiscally irresponsible to give away or throw away $3 billion of our tax dollars every year, give it to other states, and not bring that money back here so that people can have access to care. It is unconscionable, it is inhumane, and that is why we need to vote this November to get more people who will change that in places and in position to make those decisions.
You're absolutely right. And I've noticed while Jasmine was talking, some people have been asking questions in the chat, and I saw Matt answered some of them. If your questions don't all get answered tonight, at the top of the chat, you'll find each of the candidates or websites where you can contact them through that. So be sure and follow up if you've got some unanswered questions, because unfortunately, we only have a short time tonight. I'm going to combine a couple of things and we're going to go for another round here. Jasmine, if we will, I'll give you a moment. We won't go exactly in alphabetical order. I'm going to let you rest a little bit. But what I'm going to ask you to do are two things. One, since we're lucky that you are all incumbents, you've got experience down at the State House, and I'm sure going into the next session, there's a better familiarity. So tell us what's at the top of your bullet list of what you want to do for the next session, what you hope will happen, and then follow that up with talking about an action item you want to share with this group, and then sort of the closing remarks, as it were, because I don't want us to run out of time to let everybody to go for another complete round. But I think we'd like to know where you are for the next session as we get started. So we'll mix it up here. Sally, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so there are a couple of issues I would like to work on. One is in healthcare, is a bill that I filed last session that I would like to file again because it provides an alternative to what Governor Kemp is doing with his Medicaid waiver, which he's wanting to do a reinsurance program, which is a good thing because it could lower costs for the ACA policies. But the bad thing is that he wants to dismantle the public ACA federal website and let insurance brokers sell their policies directly to health insurance consumers, including these junk plans that don't cover the 10 essential benefits, which the more people who buy the lower cost junk plans and the fewer people that are in the ACA is going to raise the cost of ACA policies because there are fewer people participating. What my bill did last year and what I'll refile for this year is creates a Medicaid public option, or I'm calling it a Peach Care public option because Peach Care is people like Peach Care, but it is actually Medicaid. It's the same thing. So we'll call it the Peach Care public option, and it allows anyone, no matter their income level, to purchase a Peach Care or Medicaid plan if their private plan is not meeting their needs. And this gets them back into the 10 essential benefits. And again, the more people that are participating in this, it would be the same plan as the ACAs too. The more people are participating, the lower the ACA costs go. Plus it injects into the market for competition a lower priced plan, which will help control the price of the private plans. And then the other thing I want to work on, because I'm on the Committee of Higher Education, is I want to bring awareness to how much university fees cost our students in addition to tuition. The Hope Scholarship covers tuition, but not fees. And we've gotten to the point where fees cost about as much as tuition. And if you're part-time, they oftentimes don't prorate these fees. So your drive-out price for your university degree, if you have to work and go to school part-time, can be almost twice as high in the end as somebody who can afford to go full-time. So I'd like to prorate the fees to the number of credit hours the student is taking. And I started introducing this bill at the end of last session and got really good support from the chairman, the Republican chairman of the Higher Education Committee. So I think we might be able to get some traction with that. Action items for the next year. I think that the most important thing that we need to get involved with is being the public conscience for redistricting. Because that is going, if the census results are not contested, and I certainly hope they are, if we go through redistricting next year, we need people down at the Capitol saying, no, don't gerrymander. This isn't fair to the voters. We did that some back in 2018 and had a lot of luck. We need to do it again, in essence, being the legislature's conscience. I think that's going to be the most important issue to be involved in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mike, you want to tell us what you're working on for the next session?
Yeah, well, first thing I'll say is, if we only pick up some seats, will it be in a great spot in the state house to really affect what does or doesn't go through? But when we take over the state house this year, it is going to be extremely exciting. And thanks to everybody that's watching, all of y'all's help. But, they'll still have the governor, they'll still have the Senate, but at least we'll have the House. And as Senator Harrell was just discussing, that'll make a big difference when we go to drawing the lines, AKA gerrymandering. But we're very excited to see what happens. The things I'm working on, I mentioned before my cyberbullying bill, that's very important. I filed a bill to help with allowing cities and counties when they choose to consider overcrowding in schools to deny a zoning permit. And actually they can already do that now, but it's not in our Georgia Code section, and being there would leave there to be no question. That would really help with keeping our schools safe. So school safety is also something I'm working on, also from the angle of common sense gun safety. That's another way we can keep our schools and everybody safe. And the bill I passed, House Bill 507, came from a constituent here in Dunwoody when his business was being overtaxed. And so please reach out to your state representatives if you have a problem. And a bill that a close friend who I've known since high school, he actually went to Dunwoody High School. I went to North Springs, as I said, but he reached out. He had recently been diagnosed, his family has it, with a genetic disease. And Florida has been the, hey, y'all, other state reps on here, don't steal this bill from here, okay? But Florida has been the first state just recently to pass a bill that stops insurance companies from using genetic data for their policies. And that just goes back to pre-existing condition and why the ACA is so important. So I'm looking into this, looking if we can do this in our state that will not allow insurance companies to discriminate those with genetic diseases and have their rates be 2 and 3, 4 times more higher, even though there's no proof that their life may be different over time, or it shouldn't be allowed. A pre-existing condition should not be considered. And once again, I looked at everybody that's on this Zoom with me, and I'm grateful, and I owe a ton to y'all. It's amazing what y'all do. When it comes down to what knowledge I have and how much we've got done, it's because of all of your help. And the one thing is, we all feel overwhelmed right now. I think that's the president's idea, but as somebody told me, I think it's a great idea, start out small and grad, we got about 40 more days or whatever it is, do 5 postcards, call 5 people, and then go to 6 or 7 and just go slowly, gradually grow. And by the end, we'll all be making 50, 100 calls a day, and it's going to make a huge difference, and we're going to make a big difference. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Mike. Jasmine.
All right, thank you so much. And I do apologize if I have to rush off. I have an 8 o'clock phone bank that a group is doing for me, and they want me to do an intro. So I do apologize. So as far as legislation and what I have on the table, I do plan to reintroduce my medically accurate sex education bill. I do think that right now, when Republicans talk about, being quote, pro-life, they completely ignore all of the preventative measures and other things that we could do to prevent some abortions. And so one of those is education and, giving adequate, comprehensive sex education. There's data that shows that adequate, comprehensive, medically accurate sex education actually does lower teenage pregnancy and abortion rates. There's quite a few other things that I have on my plate, so I'll just mention 2 others. One of them, under the common sense gun legislation, I would like to reintroduce. I think Mike introduced this bill, and I was a signer on it, but I would like to reintroduce the safe storage bill, which really focuses on safe gun storage in the home in order to prevent not only things like mass shootings, but could also go a long way to prevent things like suicides. And so I think that's a really important bill. And then lastly, I'm going to bring up environmentally. I am going to probably work with Representative Mary Margaret Oliver and others to reintroduce the banana peel bill, which basically calls for lining of coal ash pits in order to prevent the seepage of the heavy metals from the ash into the groundwater in areas where people actually use well water for their drinking water. So it's a clean water bill. It's an environmental justice bill, and I think it's really important. As far as action items, I can use y'all's help in any way possible. Both the RNC and the Family Policy Alliance, two groups who are very well funded, not RNC, the RSLC, and the Family Policy Alliance are throwing a lot of money into my district and into my opponent's pockets. He even has a TV commercial on cable. Like, that is how much they're spending on this state house race. And so we are doing very well as far as, executing our campaign plan. But I would love to have volunteers to phone bank, text bank, do lit drops with us on the weekend. And also something that's really easy to do, does not cost you any money, and does not require you to even leave your seat: sharing social media posts. It helps so much to spread the word. Sharing right now is capital. It really does help us get our message out. If you would like to do that, you can go to Jasmine, the number 4ga.com/campaign, and that's where you can sign up to volunteer in different capacities. So again, thank you all so much for this opportunity tonight. And I apologize if I have to jump off really soon, but this has been amazing. Thank you, DeKalb Dems. Thank you, Jewish Democratic
thank you,
Women's
Deb.
Salon. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Matt, floor is yours.
So,
Or the screen, I should say.
I'll take the screen. So, not to reiterate all of the policy considerations that my colleagues have already talked about, but we share a lot of the same values, right? So we're fighting the same fights. Chief among them is expanding Medicaid. Chief among them. I mean, that is the number one goal for the House Democrats. We're going to continue that fight. And getting 470,000 Georgians health insurance that we've already paid for, like Jasmine was talking about. Some other personal projects that I'm going to be working on again in January is reintroducing the red flag legislation. I think that is very important. A lot of you may have seen this past week that Trump's former campaign manager unfortunately had somewhat of a mental health breakdown that may or may not have involved domestic violence with his wife. And the police were called out, and it's sort of all over the news. There were weapons involved in that, and actually they made use of a red flag law to remove him from his weapons and hopefully saved his life. And now he's able to get treatment. So we're seeing examples of that law being used in great ways to save lives in states all over the country. And I hope Georgia will be the next one. As Sally mentioned, redistricting is going to be on the top of everyone's mind come January, because 2021 is a redistricting year. We do not do the redistricting in the regular session. It will be a special session that will take place later in the year. Usually it's late summer, early fall for a week or 2 weeks. But one of the pieces of legislation I'm working on, excuse me, with others, is introducing a bill that would provide some guidelines or some guardrails for how that process will take place. And if it's too late at this point to get an independent commission together before the process. So what this bill would be designed to do is to guarantee that all of the maps are put on a publicly accessible website at least a number of days in advance, that all of the information about who drew the maps is publicly available, so that it creates an open and transparent process that everyone can monitor as we go through, and that citizens can participate in as it's going on. Two other very quick things: reintroducing my bill to ban conversion therapy, and like I said, there's some promising moves there. And then ending qualified immunity for police officers. That was a bill that we introduced last year at the tail end of session, and we're going to be pushing for again next year. I'm I put in the chat, but one of the immediate needs that I have right now for my reelection campaign is help with postcards. And some of you have already actually reached out to help me on that. But if any of you have a hand that's not already, full of carpal tunnel and cramped up from all the other postcards that you've been writing, I could really use that hand right now. So please just sign up on my website or reach out to me. I put my email address in the chat. It's mw@matthewforgeorgia.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I think probably all the candidates have postcard writing going on. I know there's some joint lit drops for Mike and Sally this weekend. There are different places on Facebook to find that there's a public Facebook group for Get Out the Vote activities for the HD 79 area. Hopefully you will go to the candidates' websites and get their contact information if you don't already have it. I think that there's so much opportunity. After last week's session of Cocktails with the Candidates, I tuned over to watch the live cast of the Lincoln Project. And at the point I tuned in, they were talking about Georgia. They were talking about the Georgia suburbs and saying, oh, well, we still need to win some of those over. And I sent them a tweet and I said, we actually doing a great job on the North Atlanta suburbs. In fact, we are quite blue up here. Right after that, they said something about Georgia, and they said Georgia is changing. In essence, watch this space. And if you're watching this space today, a new poll came out that has Biden at 49 and Trump at 47. We, of course, are going to proceed as if we are at, 39. But let's all, I know we're all doing a lot to get out, not just for the federal candidates, but our local and state candidates are so important. That's where it all starts. That's where we're really involving people. That's where we have to continue this to flip the state house so we can get done the things that we need to get done. I really want to thank the JDWS, Valerie and Joni for the forum, to Alice and Mary, who have put together a wonderful series. Mary, I was afraid to follow you. You did such a great job as moderator. So I took it very seriously. There's still a lot of time. We have 32 days as of tomorrow. So just encourage your friends to keep voting, not to be afraid. It's going to be a nervous month for us all. But keep on doing all those great things. And again, thanks to everybody who participated and everybody who will watch this after the fact. Reach out to these candidates. They are all terrific. They will answer your questions and engage your friends, because we need every single one. So Joni, Valerie, y'all got something to say, and I'll turn it back to you.
We can't top it. We'll end on that. Thank you, everybody, again. It was a great evening and we appreciate everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.